Please welcome our Iwo Jima veterans and families. If anybody on the depot, civilian or uniform, can think of an audience or a PME or a topic that's better than the one we're about to talk about today, raise your hand and let me know. Yeah, so pretty impactful. So to the Marines and all the family members from Iwo Jima, those who saw service in Iwo Jima, and many of you, for those in the audience who don't know, many of these gentlemen have served in 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And again, on behalf of all the Marines, officers, families across Marine Corps Group Depot San Diego and the Western Recruiting Region, on behalf of myself and Sergeant Major, thank you again for coming here today. So another round of applause. So we are extremely fortunate not only to have these veterans and their families with us today at graduation, which was extremely special, I'm here for what will be an extraordinary opportunity, professional military education opportunity. We've got a great speaker here. He is an incredible historian of not only Iwo Jima and the wars in the Pacific, but really wars from all the way from Gettysburg up into Afghanistan. He is a true historian. He is a student of leadership. He is a student of high-performing teams. He's a founder of the Trident Foundation, which in fact studies and trains other organizations, corporations, public, private, military around the U.S. on things such as high-performing teams and leadership. And he will drive a theme between small unit leadership, chaos into action here in Iwo Jima, to what he sees in the corporate world today. It's truly to be a dynamic opportunity and experience. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Steve McCloud.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, General Heritage. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today to represent Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. I understand we have an Iwo Jima veteran here from 2nd Battalion as well. But that is my job here to visit with you today and to speak for them and not be here. And I would tell you that the defining experience for them in World War II was Iwo Jima. There was everything that was before Iwo Jima and everything since. You know, Iwo Jima was more than just a battle. It's more than just an island. It's more than statistics, facts and figures. It was an experience that defined their lives, really. And there's a reason that it became, or assumed, the top position, I think it's safe to say, for the Marine Corps. But you know, many of these veterans came home after World War II, and they didn't talk about it. They came home and got busy with the lives that they wanted to build before the war started. Raising a family, building a career. They all had an implicit understanding of what Iwo Jima was. More than just a battle, more than an island. But they didn't talk about it. Now I think that we are in danger of losing some of that implicit understanding of what Iwo Jima really was. And as you can probably tell by the title screen, which is also going to be mostly the title of the book that's forthcoming, has everything to do with the experience of a Marine rifle company at Iwo Jima here today. That's what we will discuss. You know, the Marine Corps in World War II swelled to some 485,000 Marines. A massive team built to really take it to the enemy. And probably the pointy end of that spear, the Marine Corps spear, was the Marine Rifle Company. The Marine Corps put 162 rifle companies in the Pacific in World War II. 72 of them fought at Iwo Jima. We're going to talk about just one of them, and that would be Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. And so I would hope that you will come back with me in time to do what we can to share in some of their experience at Iwo Jima. And I'll probably start it this way. My first opportunity to return to the island of Iwo Jima in 2001 was memorable for a lot of reasons, as you might guess, might understand. And we had toured Saipan, we had toured Guam and Tinian. We had a very good group of mostly civilians, a lot of family members. We had veterans with us. Terrific group, had a great time. And I will tell you, the morning that we got up in our hotel lobby to head to the airport for that flight to Iwo Jima that one day, and I looked out across the group in this lobby, about 200 people. And I saw historian Stephen Ambrose there, James Bradley, I saw a DreamWorks film crew there, all these people with whom I'd spent days. And the lobby sounded like this. And I realized, you know, we've all been to Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, this is different. And everybody here knows it. You know, we got on the plane, we were flying chartered Continental Airlines flights in 2 planes, and I was flying with the veterans. When we came out of the cloud cover, slowly, the pilot was lowering the plane, just hanging it on its engines as we came out of the clouds. And I could look ahead and I could see this little specter in the ocean out there. Sitting behind me was the wife of the actor Lee Marvin, who had served in the 4th Marine Division during World War II and was wounded on Saipan. And the plane sounded like this. And you could look around and you could tell that the veterans were actually dreading seeing this thing again. And Pam was sitting right behind me, and all I heard was, "My God." And she understood what Iwo Jima was. And the pilot of Continental Airlines hung this thing on its engine for about 30 minutes circling around, letting everybody look down at this thing. I thought, how remarkable that is. If we go back to 1945, the combat correspondents and the press, they were doing all they could to try to tell the American people about it. A fellow named Bill Tyree, who was a pool reporter actually for the Associated Press, and he was in a B-24 flying over the island on the morning of the invasion. And he said he was looking at the fleet spreading around, surrounding this island for miles. And he looked down at this island and said it looked like a fat pork chop sizzling on a hot skillet. And he said, from the looks of it, this might take a while. When the first veterans started returning back to the West Coast, here at San Diego, one of them said, I hope I never go through anything like that again if I live 1,000 years. Another one said it was all kinds of hells rolled into one. One of our Fox Company Marines who returned said it made all the other operations look like maneuvers. They understood what Iwo Jima was all about. So let's head back ourselves. Anybody here been to Iwo Jima other than the veterans? I see a few hands out here. Not many of us get the opportunity, and it's a precious opportunity to see this thing, and much less set foot on it. So let's do what we can to see some of what the Marines saw in 1945. And let's ride along with Fox Company, 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. Again, they're just like any other unit. Folks from all over the United States, mostly all American, just type of kids coming out of high school after Pearl Harbor. Many of these guys, when they were formed in July 1942 at what was then Canton River, North Carolina, the largest number of them showed up in October 42, which means they had time to graduate high school. They split to form another regiment and then came out here to Camp Pendleton in July 43, and their numbers doubled again when they took on the great number of Marines out of Camp Elliott, who were what they called Hollywood Marines. They'd gone through MCRD here in San Diego. They were under some excellent leadership to begin with from Captain John J. Padley, Jack Padley, from Dayton University, an all-American halfback, was drafted by the Detroit Lions in 1940. He led the company through its first 3 operations, including all this training back here stateside, really. Now, I know you've got a question you want to ask. You're looking at that photo. Marines, what do you see there? What's up with those white socks, Lieutenant? Well, that's Lieutenant Charlie Ahern from Arlington, Massachusetts. And, I look at Jack's face in this photograph and I think he's probably sitting there going, geez, Charlie, come on. So I don't have an explanation for the white socks. But I can tell you, you're going to hear from Charlie again as we go through this discussion today. Again, like every other outfit, guys from all over the place, and they've got their machine gun platoon and their 60mm mortar outfit. And then there are the long, the short, and the tall. The tallest guy in the outfit and the smallest here. John, well, they call him Slim. There at the top, the tallest fella, and then Mike Mauricio, the shortest fella in the outfit. And Mike was a little sensitive about his height. And of course, his buddies never missed an opportunity to bring it to his attention. And there was a period of time on Saipan where they were having some issues with snipers, and the sniper's round went right through Mike's helmet, above his head, missed him completely. It went all the way through his steel pot. And of course, he's taking this thing off and looking at it. And Slim Gardner here looks at him and says, "Ooh, here's an opportunity." He said, "Boy, that was close. Just imagine what that might have done if you were standing all the way up inside that helmet." And Mauricio could return fire pretty well and said, "You big so-and-so, where would that bullet hit you?" Some pretty good characters. And then there were guys who joined the company later, the replacements who showed up, for example, on Iwo Jima. Here at the bottom right, in the front, a fellow named Jack Sims. And I'll just tell you, in the future, he became the Boston bureau chief for the Associated Press. And those of you who are familiar with the Boston Strangler case, he got the scoop on the confession. Pretty well-known fellow. In the mid-70s, he was called back home to Alabama to start and to head the Department of Journalism at Auburn University. And his foxhole buddy, to the left of him, is Roy Stewart. And they were always together on Iwo Jima, except for one night. Stewart was a very colorful fellow, always had great stories. One of my favorites, he told me one time, he said, "You know, when we went through boot camp, they told us that the Marine could whip any 3 sailors. Now, on my first liberty, I found out that was a lie." Roy was a favorite of mine, and we're honored here today to have his daughter, Nancy Harrelson. Nancy, would you stand up also? Representing Foxconn. Thanks for being here. And listen, I'm going to tell you the most important people in these Marines' lives after they've been through combat were their corpsmen. This is a contingent of their corpsmen after Iwo Jima. Some of the guys who had survived that battle were wounded, but this photograph was taken on the 4th of July, 45, after the awards ceremony. And they were under the excellent leadership of the battalion surgeon, the tallest guy in the photograph there, Dr. Glenn Rice. And his son here is with us today, Steve Rice. Would you please stand also? Now, there's an interesting historical tidbit that I'm going to go ahead and get rid of right now. They referred to themselves as 2F-23. Now, these days, Marines say, "Why do you write that backwards? That should be F-223, Fox Company 223. Well, we don't know why. It came out of the 6th Marines, though, out of Camp Elliott. We know they were doing it. And it lasted throughout the war. So they, to this day, they are known as 2F-23. It's as much a name as Steve or Nancy. Very interesting little tidbit. And so we may refer to that. But there are some other characters that we need to be introduced to right now because we're going to be talking about them when we get to Iwo Jima. In the back there, the tall guy, Sam Haddad. At this time, this photo was taken at Camp Pendleton in December of '43. He was a corporal. They came to refer to him as the Gentle Giant, probably 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", and a voice that I can't come close to replicating. It would shake the rafters, very deep voice. And there's another one that we need to get to know, Leo Kelly. They called him the Moose from New York. They say that he had a baseball contract that he chose not to take up, and then joined the Marines as well in October '42. But these two fellows became platoon sergeants, and these were the two anchors, I will tell you, the rocks of leadership in Fox Company. We'll see more from them as we go along. The 4th Marine Division, before Iwo Jima, had fought in 3 operations. The first in the Marshall Islands, in Roy Namur, and Kwajalein Atoll. This comes right on the heels of the first operation in the Central Pacific at Tarawa. And I will tell you that Tarawa scared the wits out of everybody and created a great upheaval in the amphibious machine that was headed out there. Fortunately for the 4th Division, it was largely, they took casualties, but they were mercifully light, let's just put it that way. But they did come away with some valuable lessons, and that being aggressive is great, but operating as a team, there's a science and an art to that we need to work on. One of the takeaways from Roy Namur. Saipan was the first, in the Marianas, was the first large landmass taken by the Marines in its entirety. The first time in history that two Marine divisions landed side by side in an amphibious assault. There are a few lessons there that these Marines of the 4th Marine Division took with them to Iwo Jima, and that's what I want to highlight here. When they made their landing at the beach, they were pounded by Japanese artillery and heavy mortar fire from the high ground. The Japanese had great faith at this time in their crust defense. We're going to destroy them at the beach. They had great faith and confidence in their plunging fire. This is one of their coastal defense guns. On Saipan is where the Marines, and certainly the 4th Marine Division, developed the tank infantry doctrine of how to work together as one. This photograph here is taken on the 8th of July, 8th of July, 1944 on Saipan. They're trying to come down off the high ground of Prudential Hill, down Carabera Pass, to get down to the plain where the largest, Tanapec Plain, where the largest bonsai of the war had just taken place. Here you see one of the tanks of C Company, 4th Tank Battalion, under the command of Bob Lehman. These guys always worked with 2nd Battalion, 23rd. This tank here, King Kong, became very famous in the newspapers back here in the States, largely because of the photographs and the correspondence that were with them. They were not successful getting to the bottom that day because the Japanese had buried mines. Well, they weren't mines, they were aerial bombs buried in the road, nose up. So the combat engineers were called forward to remove those mines so that the tanks could operate with the infantry. This was a lesson that became very important as they head to Iwo Jima. And they fell in love with the capabilities of the rocket trucks, exactly like the ones sitting outside today. So I hope you'll take time to take a look at that. Folks working with 23rd Marines and certainly the 2nd Battalion out of the 1st Provisional Rocket Detachment, 2nd Section. And on Saipan, they saw what they could do, whether to take an artillery or just to saturate a target, high priority target. In fact, I would just go ahead and get this out of the way before I forget it. Our battalion commander got back and said, this is so effective, this should be made organic to the regimental weapons company. And in fact, there may be a possibility of mounting one of these launchers on a Jeep. Well, guess what they did? 2nd Battalion, when they got back to Maui after Saipan continued, they did exactly that. Mounted one of these rocket launchers. And of course, they learned how to deal with Japanese roadblocks. This photograph taken on Saipan, on the right, that's Leroy Surface, finally getting to use that bazooka. And Victory Harbor on the left, a demolition man, you can see the demo kit on his back. Leroy scored a direct hit on this. Down below on that road, the tanks and the engineers are trying to clear their way forward. And up in the high ground, he's putting defensive fires, or suppressive fires on there. Knocked out machine gun positions, etc. 2 weeks later, Leroy Surface was credited with knocking out 2 of the tanks, 2 of the 6 tanks that came into Fox Company their first night on Tinian and was awarded a Silver Star. A couple of critical lessons about the Japanese that the 4th Marine Division identified. A couple of them had to do with the machine guns. Only on one occasion did they ever find Japanese machine guns set up to deliver interlocking fire. They fired as individual weapons, habitually. Similarly, on the beach, they found that if you were able to bypass an enemy weapon and get around the back, this guy pulling the trigger inside would make no effort whatsoever to defend himself. He's going to keep pulling that trigger and doing his job. And lastly, a very big one about their artillery, their use of artillery. And I want you to take a look at this photograph here, Marines. In fact, I'm going to give you a better look. What can you tell me about these 2 pieces here? What do you observe? Camouflaged? Kind of out in the open. Why couldn't we find them? That's kind of interesting. It was difficult to locate these things early on. What about their setup?
Different azimuths of fire.
Just different azimuths of fire. Why in the world would that be? Can they concentrate fire this way and mask their fires? No, you know what the Japanese were known to do? Their setup was 1 gun, 1 observer, 1 target zone. They had no concept at the time of concentrating or massing their fires like we did at the time. A huge lesson from the Marianas that the guys took back. So, on the 4th Marine Division side, I would summarize the lessons that they took back to Maui in the summer and fall of '44 was that enlistment coordination is a critical element that we've got to really work on. And in fact, it's something we have to fight for. It's a struggle. The engineers were striving so that the tanks could strive to get the tank engineer infantry team together. This is exactly what they trained for when they went back home. And their conclusions were the Japanese were not very good at coordinating much of anything. Some changes took place when they get back to Maui. This is again the fall of 1944, shortly before Iwo Jima. Captain Jack Padley's promoted to major, moved up to battalion exec, and his replacement is Captain Lawrence F. Snowden from the 3rd Battalion. He'd been, in fact, commanding K Company, 3rd Battalion, 23rd. But Jack had one more order that I find very interesting. It's going to help us out as we get to Iwo Jima. They had a legendary corpsman who on Saipan had been the only corpsman operating with the company for many days, roughly 2 weeks. Captain Padley put him in for the Silver Star, and he was awarded that Silver Star. Owen H. Duncan, he pronounced it Bankin, from St. Albans, New York. Okay, I got a question. Where would you guess the most Marines came from in World War II? This is a sidebar here. There was a big debate about this during the war. What state? Well, you guys are all over. Of course, the Texans thought it was Texas. And the New York boys knew better. And it was New York. They contributed the most Marines during World War II. And certainly we had our contingent. Doc Bankin is interesting because he did not spend his time back at base on Maui with the corpsmen. He lived with the Marines. He trained with them constantly. He is in none of the corpsmen photographs. Jack Padley essentially got into Silver Star on Saipan. Doc Bankin's wounded on Saipan with a saber, and then he's wounded badly at the 1st 9th Battalion, sent off to some hospitals, fights to get back to the 2nd Battalion, and he gets back in October '44. And what's Jack Padley do? He calls him up to headquarters and says, okay, here's what I'm doing. I'm moving you to the tent with the sergeants. You're in the tent with your buddies. And on the battlefield, you've got a propensity to stay back with your buddies and wait for a stretcher. And Doc explained this. He did exactly that. He said, Jack told me, you can't have friends any more than I can. There are 230 other Marines in this company, and you have the same responsibility with them that you do everybody else. The team and mission cannot be allowed to suffer, period. And certainly not from your buddies. And so Major Padley moved the corpsmen into the tent with the anchors of leadership in Fox Company, all these senior NCOs, these tough leaders. And they grew to love him. But a tremendous leadership lesson there. I don't think Padley moved any other corpsmen into those tents. Well, let me just tell you, when I first visited Fox Company, the first name that I heard was not a Marine. They said, it's too bad you did not get to meet Doc Bankin. He was part of that company as much as anybody else was, and Jack Padley knew it. Fascinating, and this pays off in Iwo Jima, as you will see. So on Maui in 1944, as they are preparing for Iwo Jima, the training now has expanded to the tank, infantry, engineer, and rocket team. So their maneuvers emphasized the importance, and I would say indoctrinated these Marines in the importance of preserving that team. We've got to work as one. And they spent all their time training that way. There's one problem. Until November, until Thanksgiving, they're at 50% strength after the Marianas. The United States is behind on manpower. The Marine Corps is doing all it can to push out new trained and ready Marines, and they're rushing. It's not until Thanksgiving that replacements finally show up. But in the meantime, 2nd Battalion does some pretty interesting training. These guys get cross-trained in every weapon in the battalion. I'm talking about your grunts, your riflemen. They're even trained in how to operate the 75 millimeter on the half-track that regimental weapons has. They're trained on the identification and removal of Japanese mines. You name it. It's a pretty high level of training that's going on here in the fall of 44. Now, when you get this influx of green replacements, guess what the job turned to? Trying to bring them up to speed and get ready for Iwo Jima. Also, these guys were mostly sick still after Marianas with a variety of afflictions. So here's the facts of life for 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines. Half the battalion that goes to Iwo Jima has only been with the battalion for 30 days. These are brand new Marines from the West Coast. Excuse me. Now, in January 45, what's the Pacific sort of look like? Well, I'll tell you what, we've had a lot of successes after a great deal of striving. The B-29s were operating from the Mariana Islands, Guam, Saipan, and Tinian, and they were operating fairly successfully, but not fully successfully. They're still trying to do high altitude bombing. And there's one thing that's right in the middle, a sore in the middle of the battle. And that's Iwo Jima, almost in the direct line between Saipan, for example, and Tokyo. A lot of reasons that the Marines went there to take this island, but that was a decision made for them. And as you know, at the rifle company level, you do what you're told. So they sailed from Maui again, as they had previously, 2,500 miles. They refuel at Inuitak, head on to Saipan, have one more rehearsal there, and then head on into Iwo Jima for the final leg. So in other words, they've been on a ship for over a month in very cramped conditions, limited water, drinking water. So your physical conditioning is certainly going to suffer, and as we would now know, you've got to be dehydrated at some level. Not a lot of opportunity for PT. Don't have a lot to tell you about this photograph that's interesting, except these are our commanders on the ship headed for Iwo Jima. We've now got a new battalion commander, Major Bob Davidson, standing back there with his arms folded. Our new company commander, Larry Snowden, you can see kneeling forward. Gus Brusendorf commands G Company, the reserve company in the assault. And Major Les Faught is now the company commander for Easy Company. These guys are on their way to Saipan for that rendezvous. We had first gotten our look at Iwo Jima on the 15th of June, 1944, when our Marines landed on Saipan. That was a carrier raid. A lot of photographs were taken during this period of time. And when I look at this interesting photo here, we see the Japanese doing an early version of the D mount. For those unfamiliar with that, that's moving with great haste. We bombed this place for 72 days straight and killed not a person, according to the Japanese. Because you've probably heard it said the Marines were on the island and the Japanese were within it, inside it. Miles of tunnels and caves had they dug, and they were waiting for the Marines. This very striking look at Iwo Jima shows the landing beach from this side of Mount Suribachi all the way to the far end. That's a 2-mile distance, a 2-mile span. That was really the only good landing beach. And of course, the Japanese knew that. The overall plan, we can simplify this way. The 5th Marine Division and the 4th Marine Division were going to be the assault outfits. The 5th Marine Division on the left was going to split. One of their regiments would curl left, isolate Mount Suribachi here. The other regiment would circle across, cut across the island, and begin its trek to the north. And the 4th Marine Division on the right would essentially operate as like a door on a hinge, and that was their entire operation. The first objective, the 01 line, is actually the second airfield, not the first airfield, which is often said. There was some some optimism here that Iwo Jima might be taken in just maybe 3 days. By the way, this is seen as a preliminary operation before Okinawa. That comes into effect in a lot of ways. But that's the overall scheme. The visuals of the landing, the scale of which are just incredible. So I'll just let us see those and take those in. 482 of these Amtraks were used in this landing here. We've come a long way. This aerial is remarkable to me because it shows 2nd Battalion's landing beach, Yellow Beach 2, all the way up to the airfield. Can you make out the shadows? You can see personnel trenches and all sorts of things in the photograph. But that's showing us our landing beach. If we were to look at it this way, we can see that the beach landing is 500 yards wide, flanked on either side by knocked out Japanese vessels. And the airfield is 735 yards inland at an elevation of 200 feet. Now that's an average rise of 9.1%. So in other words, this is an uphill battle that we've got to meet. You know, the beach at Saipan had maybe been, 5 yards deep. At Roy Moore, very similar. This beach is 735 yards deep. It's a way to look at this one. Now I would like to take us to the morning of D-Day, 19 February 1945, with Fox Company. The leading wave is not a troop carrying wave. Those are armored amphibs with 75 millimeter howitzers or turreted guns, trying to put some more firepower close in on any beach defenses. The first troop wave is actually the second line, the second wave. Fox Company's first wave is 7 Amtraks. And in the middle is the company executive officer at this time, and he is Mr. White Sox. Now, First Lieutenant Charlie Ahern is the company exec. He told me, you know, previously the company exec would be in the second wave, second troop wave. Here they thought it'd be a good idea to land him in the first. Great, lucky for me. Well, he lands in the center Amtrak, and to his left is the second platoon in 3 Amtraks, and the first platoon on the right. And when he first radios back to Major Davidson, he says, it's very light fire to begin with. Just small arms fire. You can actually pick out individual machine guns over the horizon that you could hear. They knew they were Japanese, they recognized them obviously. But you could pick out individual weapons. Light small arms fire is what he reported. It's 9:05 in the morning. However, Charlie has landed right beneath a blockhouse, right on the water's edge, just on the top of the embankment. In fact, we can see it in our aerial photograph here. Charlie has landed in front of this right here. 125 yards to his left is another one. That's the flank between Fox Company and Easy Company. Landing in between those 2 blockhouses is 2nd Platoon. And of course, Leo Moose Belly is in the 2nd Platoon and decides that he's going to get Fox Company into this fight. Photograph taken on Maui. Leo crawls over the embankment, and those 2 blockhouses were not firing out at sea. They were firing up and down the beach. They housed 25 millimeter weapons. As soon as Leo put his head over that embankment, he was hit in the head with fire from that blockhouse. And I would tell you, having spent 20 some odd years with these Marines, at that moment, the heart of Fox Company was torn out. Probably the most respected leader in the company, gone. Fox Company had been on the island maybe 20 seconds. The 2nd Battalion was trying to bring a hammer to Iwo Jima, with a rocket launcher, you name it, all the training, all this leadership that had built up for 3 years almost. Leo Kelly's gone in seconds. Charlie Ahern said that he could look to his left and he said that the boys were falling like bowling pins. The company's pinned down on the beach now for a few moments. Shortly thereafter, the next troop wave lands, including the company commander, Larry Snowden, and the flamethrower guys. They march out. Immediately, the satchel charge is ready. They throw the satchel charge in there, light up the flamethrower, and reduce that blockhouse very quickly. This defined what was going to be the battle for Iwo Jima from then on. So at 9:12, finally, the company is ready to move out. By the way, when they're pinned down in front of this blockhouse, the reserve platoon, 3rd platoon, lands also. And a lot of these guys shoot right past them on the flanks. And they keep going. And there's some veterans in this outfit, and they know their objective. We got to get to that airfield, and they don't stop to wait to see what's going on, what's holding these guys up. And they make it in several hundred yards in a very short period of time. So at 9:12, they get up and over the embankment, first platoon on the right, second platoon on the left, and start driving in. This is Yellow Beach 2 just a couple of hours later on D-Day. Captain Snowden and his runner, Eddie Davis. We'll talk about them for a moment. The company makes it about 100 yards in, 150 yards in, and at 9:20, Captain Snowden calls for the tanks. Calls Major Davis and says, land the tanks. We are running into pillboxes that we can't even see. The machine gun fire is getting very heavy, and now comes the mortar fire. 9:20. 9:27, Bob Davidson radios for the tanks. The tanks he's calling are C Company 4th Tank Battalion under Major Bob Neiman. He's got 2 LSMs landing his tanks. He's on LSM 216, and his lieutenant, who's in command of the LSM, starts bringing them in. They reach the shore at 9:40. Ramp goes down. Bob Neiman takes his tank out first. It's named Ill Wind. That was the name of his tank. And immediately it bogs down in this black sand of Iwo Jima. It's not sand. In fact, it's 70 to 80% glass and crystal. It's got a high magnetite content to it, which interfered with the use of mine detectors. The Marines said when you tried to run in this, it was like trying to run in snow. You would sink up well up to your top of your leggings that they were wearing at the time, well over your ankles. And it bogged down Neiman's tank immediately. Eddie Davis, our runner, and our captain, Snowden, are watching this play out. Neiman and a couple of guys get out and trying to shovel the tank out. Inside, his driver, C.B. Ash, is trying to get the tank back and forth. Almost an hour they're working on this, and they finally have to abandon the tank right there on the beach. Eddie Davis is watching this, and of course they're under fire out there in the ocean, and of course now casualties have come aboard. So what's the lieutenant in charge have to do? Take them out to the hospital LST. The clock keeps ticking. Eddie Davis saw him pull away and said, boy, we felt naked at that time. For 4 hours, Bob Neiman and his LSM captain tried to land the tanks, trying to find a place where they could get inland and get past the embankment and move through this bog that was Yellow Beach 2. 4 hours. The radio traffic keeps going back and forth. Can you please advise the arrival of our tanks? They've been dispatched to Yellow 2. And then finally, the regimental commander, Colonel Winsinger, says they can't land at Yellow 2. They're going to come ashore at Yellow 1. What about the rocket jeep and the mortars, the 81 millimeter mortars? Those were under the command of First Lieutenant Buck Finney. They land at 9:40 also. Immediately the rocket jeep is hit, destroyed, gone. Let's see, 3 of Buck Finney's 81 millimeters are knocked out. What about the regimental weapons and the 37 millimeters that they're bringing ashore? 3 of them are immediately knocked out, and the 4th is immobilized. The tanks are not coming today. They never will reach the 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines on D-Day. There is no supporting fire available to these guys. And they're stuck out there in front of the pillboxes. And now it's 10:30 in the morning, and here it comes. During midday is when the Japanese general apparently gave the order to unleash everything. Artillery, heavy mortars, rockets, you name it, it poured down. And the Marines could not move for hours. That's what happens when you're not sticking to script. Here you can see a photograph. Actually, this is a still shot from some of the color footage. You see Neiman's LSM trying to get him ashore still in this footage here, LSM 216. Now, this is what I want to show you. We had a combat correspondent named Bob Cook, who was with the 2nd Battalion all through the war. He's come ashore here with headquarters company men from 2nd Battalion, 23rd. And you can see that they've crossed about 100 yards, and they're at the next terrace, the 2nd terrace. I call it the 2nd terrace. Not a lot of plunging fire yet at this point. A lot of machine gun fire, small arms fire. but they're fairly isolated from that in dead ground in this embankment. But you can see also in the background Bob Neiman's tank abandoned there on the beach. Captain Snowden had been in approximately that position about an hour before. A short time later, Bob Cope took his photograph of our guys from headquarters company. They cannot bury themselves deep enough into that sand. This is when the heft of the Japanese fire was going on. Our company gunnery sergeant, Harold Douglas, who's still living, by the way, 98 years old at Lubbock, Texas, he said, listen, when this stuff came on, I just had to lay there for hours. Couldn't move. Our company first sergeant, Pete Benovich, he said to raise your head up was sure fire. The Japanese were using the direct fire machine guns to keep everyone pinned down in that bog of the sand. And Iwo Jima was conspiring with them to fix the Marines in place, hold them in place, while they brought in mortars, artillery, and rockets all on top of them for several hours through midday. This was not at all like Saipan. Not at all. It became an individual odyssey. All of these Marines said it was absolute chaos from the time we got off the landing craft. It was every man for himself. You're trying to survive. One person, you're still trying to move, but you're looking for that next shell hole, some place for cover. And throughout the day, it's fascinating, there would be these encounters with fellow Marines. At one point, Gunny Douglas said, at one point during the day, I ended up in a shell hole with Captain Snowden. And he said, boy, the Marines were really laying it on at that time, and we lay there for I don't know how long, looking at each other across the shell hole and just not moving. We were just looking at each other, waiting to see if something was going to land in there with us. And we're making the same decision that everybody else is. Do we stay here or do we try to move? He said some guys were trying to move. That was their decision. Ours was to stay put for a time. This goes on for hours. And you can imagine the rage and the frustration, the helplessness that develops throughout the day. So here you see a fellow named Al Clark from Headquarters Company. Later became a prominent educator over in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And these guys have found an entranceway into one of the Japanese pillboxes, and they are staying put for a good time. Later in the day, I just want to give us this other view, looking back toward the beach. We can see the elevation and the domination of those Japanese blockhouses in this area. This is not Yellow Beach 2 here, but it's indicative for us. Same thing here. Count the entrances to those pillboxes. Blockhouse to the left, I'm sure, something going over here. It was a 9-to-5 struggle to make it to that airfield. Sergeant Sam Haddad, whom I introduced you to, he said, I wouldn't know what Marine 3 steps to my left or right was doing. My focus was getting to that airfield. This was an individual struggle. The Japanese and the island together had destroyed organization, destroyed control. This day was a fight for survival. Somewhere, Marines are taking out positions. They're continuing to move. And fire would suddenly lift, and you never knew why, but it was time to move. At about 5 o'clock, 5:30, they reported the Fox Company was at the airfield. Easy Company was right behind them. And I want to tell you, as these guys dug in that night, they landed with 235 Marines that day. They suffered 80 casualties that day. In fact, the 2nd Battalion had 917 persons in the battalion, Marine sailors. Suffered 297, if memory serves me correct, just this one day, the best they could tell. But as the Marines dug in that night, what was their mindset? What were their emotions? Well, they told me that they started burying their wallets and burying their photographs and their personal items. Because when the Japanese killed them, they didn't want to take those as souvenirs. These guys were absolutely dejected. This was a disaster. We are going to die. The Japanese will counterattack tonight, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's no supporting fires. This was terrible. That was their mindset the first night on Iwo Jima. Not a good way to start. Iwo Jima was different from the beginning. The next phase that I want to take you to with Fox Company, and I'll just briefly mention that the attack now continued. They went into Corps Reserve for several days. They didn't go back on the line until the 28th of February. They were very busy during that time, but they were not on the line per se. But the drive now is into what became recognized as the main belt, the central belt of Japanese defense. This is the high ground of Iwo Jima on the northern side. Hill 382 and placed in 362 and others become prominent names in this area. But during this reserve period, here's a photograph, for example. That's Captain Snowden on the field phone. And on his left, our left of him, is Gunny Douglas, Company Gunny, and Mr. White Sox on the right, First Lieutenant Charlie Ahern. They're very glad to see the sunlight because in the middle of the night, Japanese mortars were fired and Gunny Douglas was buried alive. Managed to dig him out. They were not successful in digging out one of their corpsmen. And we lost a couple of NCOs as well in that barrage. So Gunny Douglas doesn't look real pleased with the situation. That's probably why. But during this period of time, about 4 days into the battle, the company and the battalion received 45 replacements. I should say the company received 45 replacements, including Jack Sims and Roy Stewart. Now these are 45 guys who are fresh out from the United States, in the middle of combat on Iwo Jima. 45 of them don't know anybody, and they arrive in these units. And this happened across the island in these Marine units. Important for us to plant the flag now. These guys go back on the line on the 28th, and this is part of the fight for Hill 382 and what became known as the meat grinder. Trifecta, I guess, of positions. Hill 382, the amphitheater, and Turkey Knob also, which is in there. This is Hill 382, known to our Marines simply as Radar Hill. And on the 28th, they've got to fight across this moonscape between Hill 382 behind us and Turkey Knob in the distance on the right. And on their right, the right flank, they're going to attack across the shoulder of what was named the amphitheater. This is a panorama that I connected two photographs together to give us a view of the amphitheater. We're looking back towards the attack. They attacked to our right, coming at us. But you can identify some Japanese entrances here, positions from which they fired on the 2nd Battalion, 25th Marines. This was a tough nut to crack for several days. Well, the day of the 28th February was a tough one again for the 2nd Battalion. Here, Bob Cook captured a photograph of John Richardson up front. Here is one of the engineers, 4th Engineer Battalion, cutting a trail across the open prairie, some of these guys called it. Hill 382 was on their left. A ridge ran out further from that, and once they got out there, the Japanese opened up with machine guns. They couldn't see them. It was a very tough day. A lot of casualties that day. They had to withdraw under cover of smoke at the end of the day. This photograph belonged to the battalion sergeant, Glenn Rice, obviously showing some casualties being brought back. You can see Hill 382 in the distance and the radar, former radar position on top. This is now, I want to point out, simply a killing field, open field, no man's land. The central part of Iwo Jima that they experienced. And then I want to take you to the third phase for Fox Company, and for the entire Corps actually landing on Iwo Jima. The 5th of March, the Corps commander decided everybody needs to rest and reorganize. Everybody except the engineers and the tankers, because they were still up in the north trying to clear out Japanese mines and clear out some of the terrain that was going to be necessary to allow them to work together with the infantry. The big attack, the big push on Iwo Jima was to begin on the 6th of March, 1945. And this was a far different battle from any other earlier battles on Iwo Jima. So whereas before they had attacked into the meat grinder, now we are taking the high ground on the far side of the airfield. And we're attacking across terrain that is very difficult for the veterans to describe, and certainly for a historian to describe. They're attacking across against the grain of a corrugated terrain running from the high ground down to the ocean. Jagged, broken troughs, corridors, cross compartments. Very difficult to attack across until they could get that high ground. But that characterizes the attack on the 6th. To try to crack this Japanese defense before the attack on the 6th, the Corps commanders decided, let's use every piece of artillery we've got. 12 battalions of artillery prep fires that morning in each section. All the division artillery and all the Corps level artillery and naval gunfire as well. This went on for some 90 minutes. Our guys were lying out on the ground waiting for this to start. And Gunny Douglas, for example, said, boy, when those 155 started coming in about 100 yards in front of us, he said it was scary. Unlike anything he'd ever experienced. And as soon as they fired, then these other fellows had snuck in behind them and launched a salvo from 6 trucks. 6 of these rocket trucks, that's 36 each. And scared the wits out of the replacements because they'd never heard this before. Scared the bejesus out of it. And as soon as they fired these things, they turned and took off in a hurry. And the Marines saw why, because you're getting Japanese mortars right after them. Some of you might have seen some Iwo Jima footage, and they show these guys turning and getting out of there. Here comes the fire, rocket fire and mortars. But that's what prepped the attack this morning. I've listed just a few of the types of weapons that we ran into in this area. There's some large stuff. Rockets, the spigot mortar, the sled you could see that was used to launch these rockets. Some of them went all over the place. Irby Hip, one of our machine gun section leaders, said, you know, the first time they fired that rocket off, we laughed because it went all the way over Mount Suribachi. Ralph Leonoff said they fired that and even the Japanese ran. There was no telling where it was going to land. But when it did, everything shook. They were tremendously powerful, just inaccurate. Now we're attacking into this terrain. And this is very characteristic of it. They said if you've got a squad together in any of these, what we'll call open area, that's an open area. You're too crowded. Our platoon leader said, you couldn't control a unit here. No way. You couldn't see who was to the left or right. Dale Cook, one of our PFCs, some of you from out here know him, said I could look over to my left and see the heel of a boot, and if it moved, I knew it was time to move out. You'd look a few feet down a cross compartment or a corridor, you could see a few feet, but not much further. It broke. As soon as they jumped off in the morning, the Marines knew what their objectives were, but the fractures started happening. And a squad of, if you had 12 or 13 still in the squad, broke down into 2s and 3s. And these guys couldn't even see each other. And I asked him, so how'd you control a unit in this kind of terrain? Second Cadet said, you couldn't control the unit. So well, how'd you get the Marines to move forward? He said, you didn't have to get them to move forward. They moved forward on their own. So well, how are they going to do that if they can't even see each other? That's the magic question, isn't it? The fact of life is they did. And that's what we study all the time. This is characteristic of the 6th of March. And I want to follow the 2nd Platoon of Fox Company on this day as they deal with these now caves and tunnels. And they can't even find the openings to these caves in many cases. The tanks cannot help them. They can't get to them because of the terrain. So the tank infantry team is being blocked, barred, interfered with, whatever you want to call it. This is one of the C Company tanks here. One of the most valuable things that we got from them was not the 75 millimeter, but the flamethrower, because it could reach into those cave openings and the pillbox openings. But the problem was, whereas on Saipan, where the Marines love to see the tanks show up, on Iwo Jima, they started realizing that tank is a magnet for Japanese mortar fire. So it was a double-edged sword. You needed their help, but you wanted to keep your distance on Iwo Jima. But the Dozer tank, especially here, what's he doing? They were precious because they could carve a trail to get to the infantry. This represents for me a good picture of the battle for coordination that began in northern Iwo Jima. That minute by minute, day by day struggle of the engineers, the tankers, the rockets, and the infantrymen, and the individual Marine to refuse to be broken and separated from their teammates. These guys, those tankers in the C Company, and this is fact, I feel confident in this, their position, their job, where they belonged, was with those infantrymen. And if they weren't there, they had work to do. They were failing in their own minds. That's a pretty good team mindset. This was the fight in Northern Iwo Jima. 6th of March, 2nd Platoon. Lieutenant Kyle Drake, 2nd Lieutenant, straight out from Texas A&M University, is leading his platoon into this terrain. And what the Japanese did was draw Marine units, small groups, really not really units, into some of this terrain, pin them down with machine gun fire, and bring in mortar fire and rocket fire on top of them. That's what happens to Drake's platoon this morning. Bob Funk and several other guys are trying to locate a machine gun. They can't find them. Snipers are deadly. In fact, the reports say the Japanese sniper fire was extremely effective, especially within 300 yards. Oh my goodness. I don't know when you could see 300 yards in Iwo Jima. But these guys get pinned down, and here come the mortar fire. And Drake starts getting fired up. He's trying to get his platoon out of there. And he rises up to his feet at one point, and the sniper's waiting. And he's shot through the carotid artery, and down he goes. His radioman, Dennis Kavanaugh, gets on the handheld handy-talkie, calls back to the company CP. Fox 6, this is Fox 2. Drake's dead, Drake's dead. The response is, we'll get somebody up there to you. Mortar fire keeps coming. Finally, who shows up? I might have clicked it too many times. I did. Bear with me. Got excited there. Who shows up? It's Sam Haddad. He's a platoon guy for 3rd Platoon. Captain Snowden sent Sam Haddad over to the 2nd Platoon. Kavanaugh tells me that when he arrived, he didn't know why he was there. Didn't know what his job was. Just a quick brief on that, I promise you. They get back on that radio. Hey, there's no officer up here, you better get somebody up here. Captain Snowden, the message comes back across the radio. You're it. You got to get those men out. So, Haddad got busy. They call in Smoke, and he does get the 2nd Platoon out that day, and they get back to the rear. That evening, one of his sergeants, Sergeant Tom Galligan, sits down with a piece of paper that he had filled out the night before of 2nd Platoon. And he starts marking through the names of the losses, including Lieutenant Drake, who you see at the bottom left. Now, I would ask you the question. Looking at this piece of paper, who was in front in that terrain? Who was in the lead? You got 1st, 2nd, 3rd squads. I hear 3rd. You see where all the losses were? It's indicative to me, this is a picture of the Battle of Iwo Jima in the northern part. You can't deploy an entire platoon even, or even 2 squads. Sam Haddad told me, he said, I never moved a squad. Never. Never had an opportunity to. That was too big a unit. But this precious piece of paper paints a picture of that battle in this area for us. Tremendous losses that day. Let me paint a picture for you there in that regard. Some of you may not be able to see the numbers over here, and I apologize. 8 killed, 33 wounded. But look at those. You've lost a platoon leader, 2 platoon sergeants, 3 sergeants, and 16 corporals. That's a lot of leadership gone out of the company. It's not just the numbers, it's the leadership that matters. But they came back and they dug in and they started briefing up for the next day.
Those young Marines, despite the casualties we suffered today, they knew that tomorrow we're going to do the same thing all over again. When the sun went down, we tried to count what our casualties were and who was left. And what do we need to carry on tomorrow? They knew what was going to happen tomorrow. They're going to continue to butt their heads against that stone wall of resolve on the Japanese side. But they did it anyway. They didn't hesitate. They knew that's what they were there for. They knew what the objectives were, and they fought in terms of let's gain the objective and get out of here. And another side effect of that was that we tried to instill in the troops, the attitude was, if your leader goes down, step in and take the responsibility for leadership. Don't wait for somebody else to come. Do what's got to be done. Step in and fill the shoes of that lost leader you had. The Marines did that. We ended up with corporals commanding platoons. We ended up with sergeants, sometimes commanding companies. That's because the servant leadership concept mixed with the desire to gain the objective and required teamwork and somebody to lead it. It all fitted together. One, to make effective battlefield tactics. Second, to ensure that we kept our eye on the objective. And third, working together. Regardless who the leader is, we work together under that leadership to do what's got to be done. That's what paid off on Iwo Jima.
Another story that's of interest that day that took place, one of our sergeants that you see in the middle, well, I did it again. Bill Wyckoff was wounded that morning, and he was hit by a grenade as soon as they jumped off. Like he said, let's go, and the grenade went off. He was temporarily blinded, broke his shoulder, penetrated the lung. He was carried back through the Fox Company CP, and when he came to, he was blindfolded, but he heard a female voice. And she said, "It's okay, I'm right here. Those are just Navy photographers." He heard the popping, saw the lights. And it was Ensign Jane Kendi, a very famous photograph here. She's kneeling over Bill Wyckoff of Fox Company. Jane was a very young Navy flight nurse. This was a brand new undertaking. I'll tell you, the photograph was taken by a Navy Lieutenant, Gil DeWitt, working for Edward Steichen, a very famous photographer. He'd been assigned to fly with Lieutenant Ann Purvis, the senior nurse, to Iwo Jima on this day because she was going to be the first Navy flight nurse. And Gil got there on Guam. He got there early in the morning, 15 minutes early, and the plane was already gone. It had left 15 minutes before he got there, half hour early. Apparently, Miss Purvis was in a hurry. Well, he was a little dejected and walked back to the second plane where he saw this young nurse working with a corpsman, loading up the plane, decided to get on board, do what he could do, go on to Iwo Jima. Well, they get to Iwo Jima, and they've got to circle the island for 90 minutes that morning. Why? Because of that tremendous bombardment that we were laying on the island that morning. They were very glad to get on the ground, and when they did, they found out, well, they asked the question, where's Lieutenant Purvis's plane? Well, it had missed the island. And Gil DeWitt was on the right plane after all, and Jane Kendi became the first Navy flight nurse to land in a combat zone. And this photograph was printed all over the world in newspapers and the National Geographic and September 45, you name it. And by the way, now let's see what we got after this. They were reunited in 1986 here in San Diego at the Iwo Jima reunion. The San Diego newspaper was the one that carried this. First time they had spoken since 1945. Well, I tell you what, when I first joined Fox Company reunions, they asked me if I knew about the Angel of Mercy and then the Angel of Iwo Jima, as they call her. But they just adopted her as one of their own. I'm very pleased to say I'm in touch with their family, and they are also part of the newsletter group, the 2F23 family. It's a delight to have them together. Now I want to go to the 7th of March and give us another example of this fight in northern Iwo Jima. Here's an example of some of those rockets and the spigot mortar that the Japanese were using. And at 5:15 in the morning, the 7th of March, they were firing these rockets off. The artillery, by the way, was no longer really a factor in this battle. We had overrun those positions. We'd taken the high ground from them, most of that observation. So they were just firing rockets more and more blindly each day. Well, they fired a lot of rockets on this morning, and one of them happens to score a hit on the 2nd Battalion CP. and knocks out, renders, I should say, incapacitates the battalion commander and the battalion exec, which is Jack Padley. He's badly wounded and evacuated. Kills our comms officer, badly wounds several of the others. So the regimental exec comes down, has a look, realizes there's nothing here. There's no staff. So they delay the day's jump off for 30 minutes so he can cobble together another staff from other outfits, other regiments even, so that they can begin the attack. And these were what were falling on the troops day in, day out up there, never stopped. I want to jump to the afternoon of the 7th. 3rd Platoon is out there. Dale Cook is part of this, for those of you who know this. And Fox Company has finally had an opportunity. If you can see this, the time in this dispatch here, 16:24, 4:24 in the afternoon. F Company in a firefight. Well, let me tell you what that firefight was about. A fellow named Joe Kolesnick, one of the Thanksgiving replacements, has climbed up a rock and looked down into, from those of you who ever lived in the South, a holler, a rock holler, almost a quarry. One of these tight areas like this. He's the only one that can get up there to look. A tank has shown up from Neiman's outfit, and they're blasting rounds into the rock. Japanese are pouring out of it this way, and Kolesnick opens up with his M1 and is hollering for help, and nobody can get to him to help him. He's the only trigger puller. So they start loading weapons, BARs, M1s, you name it, passing them up to him as fast as they can. And they start running out of ammunition. Are you kidding me? That's pretty quick. Well, it's late in the day. They call back. Snuffy Lawrence is the radio operator, calls back to the CP. Hey, we're running out of ammo up here. Well, you guys actually need to start coming back. Boy, they start cussing a blue streak. You kidding me? They've never seen the Japanese above ground. And now we have an opportunity. So Charlie Ahern has taken over the company because Larry Snowden has been wounded and evacuated for the 2nd time. And so Mr. White Sox is now the company commander. And Charlie says to Eddie Davis, the company runner, do you think you can manage it? Davis says, I know where they are. He says, what about that machine gun? You know there's a machine gun out there. He said, I think I can get to him. And from the reserve platoon, he grabs bandoliers, all he can carry, and runs out through the fire, and sure enough, the machine gun is still there. Davis said, you know, it's a funny feeling when you're under machine gun fire. He said, but we had learned 5 seconds above ground was too long. But if you could manage 3 or 4, you could probably find a rock or a shell hole to hit. And so he runs out there, jumps into a shell hole, waits for a time, hoping the guy will forget he's there, jumps up and runs again, makes it up there to these guys, drops the bandoliers, heads back and makes another couple of trips, and is awarded eventually the Silver Star for this action. Finally, they do get called back. You guys have got to come back, and we've got to tie in for the night. It's it's almost 1800, and they're still cursing out. Finally have an opportunity. Now this is fascinating to me. 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines, was on the far left of the 4th Marine Division, the far left unit. They were executing the main effort for the 4th Marine Division on this day. And that's Fox Company up there in the front. But what is the main effort for the 4th Marine Division on this day at this time? One trigger puller. And everyone else doing all they can to support it. Another indication of the fight in northern Iwo Jima. Finally, we've taken the high ground. And now we can fight with the terrain, down the corridors toward the ocean. And I've put together some photographs here so you can see the corridor down which Fox Company fought on the 8th of March, 1945. They came from the left into this position. It's a junction with another corridor from the left as well. We'll talk about that in just a few moments here. So, Mr. White Sox is in command on the morning of the 8th of March. And they're pushing down this corridor, and he finally has some tanks with him. Bob Neiman's tanks are there. 3 are surviving. 2 have already been knocked out this day. And Charlie is staying away from the tanks, like we described. Mortar fire is landing all over them. And by way of radio, he's trying to direct their fire into machine gun positions in the sidewall of this corridor, using the SCR 300, the backpack radio. And on the other end of that radio is First Lieutenant Max English inside that tank. And Charlie said, you know, apparently I was not that good a communicator. He said, I got on the phone with that tank commander and said, you know, I think I'll do a better job if I come out there. So out into the mortar barrage ran First Lieutenant. Well, let me correct myself. He'd now been promoted to captain in the midst of this battle. So Captain Ahern runs out into the mortar barrage to the back of that tank, which was named Crispy. And he gets on the field phone that Bob Neiman and his guys had attached to the back of the tank. So I've taken a picture here. This is Hank Belmont's tank. Anybody from Oklahoma? Hank Belmont went on to be long-term governor of Oklahoma from C Company, 4 tanks. But look at this. They've added the phones in a more permanent way. They've added a target clock back there. And you know the fuel tank on the back of the tank? Fuel drum, it's not fuel, it's water for the infantry. You can see the filler tube right here for the infantry. Doing all they can so that the team can work as one. This is where Charlie was on the morning of the 8th. And they go to work. And he's on the back of his phone, on the back of the tank, and they start knocking out pillboxes. We know they go for about an hour and knock out 3 or 4. Of course, the Japanese get nasty and they start responding with mortar fire, and finally they find him. And he's clipped in the back of the neck, and down he goes. Doc Bankin is there. He witnesses this, Owen Bankin. Runs out into the mortar barrage, revives Ahern, and of course Ahern said, hey, I had a job to do, trying to get back to it. But Bankin said, no, you're done, you're out of here, you gotta go back. And so Ahern is evacuated. Well, of all things, Eddie Davis, the company runner, runs out there and grabs the phone, and they resume. And keep going. Well, about that time, Eddie turns around and looks in the air and sees a couple of American fighters coming right at him down this corridor. And one of them, he can see, is slinging a napalm tank beneath it. And something about this just didn't look too good to him, so he ran back to the side of the ridge, and sure enough, the plane dropped napalm all over the tank. Well, our Marines are standing there watching in awe as the crew starts bailing out of this blazing tank. Everybody except one, the driver, Corporal WWII Stanley. He stayed in the tank, pulled the thing forward out of the flames, and then they watched him crawl out of the tank with a handheld fire extinguisher and start putting flames out. And Eddie said he was using language that you couldn't, wouldn't pass the censor. And it didn't do much damage to the tank, but it kind of blew everybody's mind. Well, it's interesting to me that the tank's name was Crispy. And Lyle B. Stanley was awarded a Silver Star, commended for his coolness under fire. So you can't make this stuff up. That's what they saw. In a separate incident on the same day, as they were moving out, Sam Haddad's 2nd platoon had to move through. They found themselves in a minefield. So they got into a single file. And in front was Ed Ricketts, the point man. Behind him was Bill Crowley. 10 yards behind him was Dennis Kavanaugh, then Sam Haddad, and then Doc Banker. And the Japanese were firing mortar fire on them. And Ricketts, for some reason, stepped to the side into a shell hole, and the explosion was devastating. And he was killed. Bill Crowley, 10 yards behind him, was blown further back into Dennis Kavanaugh. They're yelling at each other in all of this chaos. Bill, are you okay? No, I'm not. I'm blind. I can't see. They're calling for corner. Well, Doc Banker has already run out into the minefield to check on Ed Ricketts up front. Runs back to Haddad and says, Ed's gone. Then he gets up to run to help Bill Crowley and Dennis Kavanaugh. And Haddad grabs him. Doc, where are you going? You know we're in a minefield. He said, Sam, while we're sitting here talking, Bill's out there bleeding to death. Out he goes into the minefield. They get out there, he takes off his shirt, His t-shirt stuffs it into the wound, an open chest wound in the crowd. Crowley's got steel shards in his brain, blinded for life and maimed. And there were no stretchers nearby, and the aid station is at least 400 yards distant. Doc Banker was about 5'7", 140 pounds. Crowley was bigger than he was. Kavanaugh said he helped him up, helped Crowley onto Doc Banker's back, and off they go. And Bankin, who had been wounded already twice, and once through the leg, carried Crowley all the way back to the aid station and was shot through the thigh while he was doing it. Made it all the way to the station, dropped him off, dressed his wound, said no bones broken, and back he went. Meanwhile, Sam Haddad in the minefield with his platoon, including a lot of these young replacements, and they've all gone on the ground now. They're not, nobody's budging. Sam said he went to each one of these guys, especially the replacements. He said you had to look them in the eye and see how they're doing. He said some of these guys looked at me and said, Sarge, I don't know. And Sam said, listen, I'm afraid just like you are. Don't let that get you down. I get it. But there are things that we have to do. And he went to each of them and did this. And then, and these guys referred to him as the gentle giant. Then he rose to his feet. And he told me, he said, I looked in the eyes of these young Marines, and they weren't standing up. They were looking at him because they knew he had another point man. He said, I looked in their eyes. They were young kids. And finally I said, okay, follow me. But everybody steps in everybody else's footprints. And he led them out of the minefield. A short time later, Doc Bankin showed up. The Marines thought he was crazy. Doc, you've been wounded twice already, and here you are again with a new wound and a new bandage around your leg. What are you doing here? Doc responded to him, I'm all you got. They continued to attack down the corridor that evening. Let me show you this illustration here. They had to leave their tanks. The tanks had to stay behind after they ran into this minefield. So now the infantry's on its own once again. The company moved into the corridor and split, left and right. Fox Company was set up there, but there's a gap between them and the 24th Marines on the right, so they bring in what's left of E Company, about 60 Marines on the left, and bring them in that evening. As far as Fox Company is concerned, Sam Haddad sent his second platoon, 21 Marines, across the corridor. Third platoon took the rough ground up above them on their right. Roy Stewart was the last man on Fox Company's right. Some interesting stories there, but we'll push on a little bit here. Company CP was back at the joint, or the juncture of the two corridors, a couple hundred yards back. And we know that Fox Company had to dig into a minefield at this time. And Intel was telling them that the Japanese were planning a counterattack this evening. They had captured some orders, they had captured a map. There was no question. So as they began to dig in this evening, so same situation. Sam crawled on his hands and knees to these guys and reminded, especially the replacements, listen, we are all here. Nobody's going anywhere. You stay in your hole tonight. Anybody above ground is the enemy. If you get out of your foxhole or fighting hole, you will be killed. And they stacked up crates of grenades at each hole. We know that Frank Pyle, they call him Ernie Pyle, showed up. He's one of the machine gunners. And he showed up to his old buddy, Corporal Glover, and said, you might need this tonight. And left him a very cool machine gunner. So Glover put it on the right flank up against the base of the corridor. And they got ready for action that evening. It began that evening. This is the counterattack that you read about with Iwo Jima. It began with heavy mortar fire, rockets. And it was firing all into the battalion area, several hundred yards behind this position as well. And as darkness fell, and Dennis Kavanaugh began calling for flares, and they said, all of a sudden we could see hundreds of them way down the corridor, these brown uniforms moving back and forth. And they attacked 4 times, came at them in 4 waves, And Kavanaugh tells me that in the lull between waves, booming across the corridor was Haddad's huge voice calling out, "Full load, ammunition, give me full load." Drop those clips and put new ones in and get fresh. Here they came, and each time they got closer and closer. And Haddad said that they got so close that we were throwing grenades like snowballs at them. And there was hand-to-hand fighting in some of these holes. 21 Marines. And the Japanese did not get through. Sam said to me, you know, you would think some of these replacements, these young kids, that they would have gotten up and run. He said, they stayed though. They did a good job. They did a good job. I said, Sam, I think I know why they stayed. It had everything to do with him going to look them in the eye. You know, a team needs two things. We talk about this in our leadership stuff all the time. You've got to have coordination, but then you've got to have resolve. Where's the resolve come from? The coordination is the strategic leadership bit. You know, what's the plan? We know that, that's going to help us coordinate. We have to have that in this terrain of Iwo Jima. Sam Haddad, in fact, told me, he said, look, on Saipan and Tinian, with that open ground, you could control a unit. You could move a squad, a platoon, a company. Iwo Jima was not a matter of control. It was a matter of everybody knew where they had to go. And they went. And that's the bit, the personal leadership thing, where he went to look these guys in the eye. Sam, I think I know why they stayed.
You've got to show leadership. You've got to show that when it's time to do something, you're mopping up, and the men are a little leery. You have to lead. You actually lead. You don't appoint somebody to move out front. You lead. And because you lead, you're demonstrating to them that, yes, you're afraid like everybody else, but there are certain things we have to do. And so, follow me. And then once you get that kind of respect, you can order people to do things, because once they see you leading, you gain their respect, and they will take an order because they knew that you would do the same.
That was their final night in combat in World War II, on the line. They had policing work and mopping up to do on the island and so forth, but that was Fox Company's last fight, as it were, on Iwo Jima. Their company commander, Larry Snowden, later on became the spearhead for what became known as the annual reunion of honor on Iwo Jima. Of both sides, survivors of both sides and family members of both sides. Of course, he spent a lot of time in Japan after the war, but it became very important for him to emphasize the phrase that he became very familiar with and fond of, once enemies, now friends. And it was important for him that carry on much longer than he was here on the island, or on this earth, I should say. But that meant a great deal to it. But I asked him, why should we continue to commemorate Iwo Jima? What's the importance of this? And these younger generations, especially folks who aren't connected with Iwo Jima, why should they be concerned with this? His comments here.
Well, I'd like to answer that in terms of what I think the flag raising memorial, the Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington. I want young people to look at that and recognize that those who are shown in that statue of the memorial, that they are representative of the young people who fought on that island. And those who fought on that battle on Iwo Jima represent the millions of young men and young women who went to war in World War II. One of the problems is that young people, and lots of others, have a hard time understanding that 16 million men and women served their nation in World War II. And on the day the war ended, 12 million of those were still in uniform, and 70% of them had served overseas. I want the War Memorial flag raising statue to be a reminder to young people that what they enjoy today is freedom has to be paid for. It was paid for by those guys representing the others who represented us. And that's the message I wanted to carry away. And I also want the young Marines to understand that those men that they see up there set the standards that they are expected to meet today. I'm assured by the Commandant of Marine Corps and those that I see that those standards are still being met by our young Marines today. And I think it's important for young Marines to know that it's their code as Marines to prevail in that battle. I'm often asked the question, what was your most effective weapon on Iwo Jima? Flamethrowers, flamethrower tanks, satchel charges, rifles, machine guns, rockets, what? My answer is none of the above. My most effective weapon on Iwo Jima was an individual young 18-year-old Marine. His personal training, his dedication to his fellow Marines, his patriotism, his personal valor and bravery, all combined in that one individual to make him my most effective weapon on that island. The Marines of today are still trying to meet their challenge, and they're doing it. But so I want that war memorial and the flag raising there to be a constant reminder to all Americans that those folks help pay for what you're doing today. And if you think your life is tough today, think about them. If you're grateful for your status today and what you do, all of us can do today what we want to do, we'll do it again tomorrow if we want to. Why? Because those young men and their compatriots did what they did when they served.
The Japanese and the island of Iwo Jima worked together, conspired together to fracture Marine units, to deny them concealment and cover maneuver. The Japanese had all of it. Deny them support from their higher assets, supporting fires. And they were successful in doing that. But what they could not do was break the resolve of the individual Marine to get back with his fellow Marine, to stay with his fellow Marine, to fight as one. They could not break the resolve of the engineers and the tankers to get back to the infantry, to fight and win as one. And they were not fighting for survival. As General Snowden just said, it was their code to prevail, to win. And this is the only battle where we suffered more casualties in World War II than we dealt out to the enemy in the Pacific. 23,000 Japanese dealt out 26,000 casualties on us, but they did not win. It was a close battle, a close fight. It was tough. We were running out of people. But it was in the code of the Marines to work as one, and they spent their time on Iwo Jima fighting that battle for coordination. I think they spent as much time fighting that battle as they did fight the battle against the enemy, or the Japanese, because both the island and the Japanese were the enemy. Finally, the Marines of Fox Company got word that they were going to be able to leave this island. And I asked Roy Stewart, what did that feel like? That had to feel pretty good. Finally, we get to leave this place. He said, you know, Steve, he said, there was a weight of gloom that settled down on me. I can't explain it. All of us felt just depressed. And on the morning of 16 March, they came walking back down out of the high ground, back down toward Yellow Beach 2. And before them lay a neatly tailored garden of white crosses, now the 4th Marine Division Cemetery. Many of them walked down to the beach, to the embankment, to await the ship to come pick them up. laid down their packs, and many of them walked back through that cemetery to pay their final respects to their buddies. Some did not. Sam Haddad did not. He did not want that final affirmation that his buddy Leo Kelly, for example, was gone. But some did. Herbie Hibb did, and Roy Stewart went with him. Roy later said he wished he hadn't, for the same reason. They got back to the beach to wait for the LST to come pick them up. Roy said he was looking around at these guys, and there was no discussion, there was no conversation. All of them were sitting quietly, just looking out at the ocean when it was off. He said, that's when I realized how proud I was to be part of this outfit. The ship came and got him, the LST, took him out to the USS Rockbridge, a brand new ship. Captain Combs' ship was brand new to the theater, he had a brand new crew, and they knew all about Iwo Jima before they got there. And they were there to pick up part of the 4th Marine Division and take them back to their rest camp on Maui. The next morning, there was a Protestant service on the afterdeck of the ship, and Roy Stewart said that from where I was sitting, I was looking ashore at the division cemetery, and I wanted to jump off and swim back. What is that all about? He said, I've never felt so dejected in all my life. Then the chaplain started to speak, and the first words out of his mouth were, no greater love hath any man than this, than to lay down his life for his buddies, for his friends. Stewart said, something about that satisfied me. Finally, on the 20th of March, the ship sailed. Captain Cohen turned the ship toward Guam first to take these guys away from the island. And as it sailed away, some of them turned back and looked toward the island. Gunny Douglas looked back and said, you know, it was amazing to look back at this and think that you survived this thing. He said, boy, if I get home, I want to build a house by the side of the road and be a friend to man. Friend to man, I'm sorry, an old poem that he remembered. And as they sailed away, some looked back toward the island, and others did not. But all of them had the sense that it was watching them escape over the horizon. And for the rest of their lives, they've known it's still there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, one more time for Mr. McCloud. We've got about 10 minutes, and then we'll let you all go back. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. We'll go ahead and open it up.
I'd like you to tell me a little bit about that amphitheater. I was given over in fire with a machine gun and our troops defense. We were company chief. And I saw my friends go in, I saw my friends go out. And I wondered what happened the next day after that. Did you help me?
You're G Company's 23rd Marines. You're Mr. Kappa? I was told that you were here. I'm very glad that you spoke up. Thank you very much. On that day, on the 28th of February, I assume that's what you're referring to when the 2nd Battalion was attacking in that position. G Company was actually involved the day before also. So I'm not going to be sure that I'm talking about the same day when I respond. But on the 28th, G Company was on the left of Fox Company. Now let me back up and be correct. G Company we were moving in a column of companies. G Company was in front. We're headed toward Hill 382. This is the third day of fighting for Hill 382, and it's been a rough time up there. G Company is now trying to move to the right base of Hill 382, and when they get into an open position, Fox Company is supposed to swing around to their right. One platoon of Fox Company swings around to the right. That's Sam Haddad's platoon at the time, before he moved to second platoon. Roy Stewart, Nancy's father, and the other machine gunners got up on a ridge that ran off Hill 382 to the right. They got into that position, and G Company was on their left. And we're just not sure at what time things were starting to fall apart with mortar fire, and the Japanese were using phosphorus fire as well. You were providing machine gun fire to that position, did I hear correctly? We don't know where the order came from or what precipitated it, what started the withdrawal. But what I can tell you from Fox Company's position was the machine gun fire on the left flank and then the mortar fire dropping in was too much to deal with. They could not find those positions at all. The battalion had moved into this position. Now, and by the way, our guys, Sam Haddad had always referred to this as the amphitheater. No, history will show that the amphitheater is actually to the right, a little bit lower. We're back up on the shoulder, the back shoulder of the amphitheater. But it was a vast open plain, which I think you probably remember as well. So, just a killing field. There was nowhere to go. Our mortar men were back there with the 81s doing all they could to try to silence the Japanese mortars and could really do nothing. Really could not. We pulled back, 2nd Battalion pulled back that day, and that was their last effort against Hill 382. It's the next day finally it fell. Where Marines could get to the top and stay there. It was not a good place to be still, but we finally took it away from the Japanese. So I can't clear up a great deal for you there. Now, let me explain something for everybody. It took 6 years, and I've been with these Marines for almost 25 years. It took 6 years to work on this book, to dive into the action reports and try to piece together what was never pieced together. And it is opaque. You can't see through it, a lot of it. And you have to use all these pieces of evidence to try to piece together what happened. And we just really don't know what happened to G Company that day. Really don't. Battalion report didn't tell us much. Yes, sir. Anyone else?
Yeah.
I'll try to do better. Surabashi. By the time we got up there on the 28th February, Surabashi was ours. The flag raising had already taken place. And so that observation had been taken away from the Japanese. And Hill 382, which was now a problem in front of us, was the last really piece of elevation that gave them all their observation they needed to take away from. So that was the importance of 382. 382 was this, I talked about internal deformities. Japanese were coming out of everywhere and nowhere. You couldn't find where they were, and the Marines were really struggling to stay together to find it there. You get down to fighting with E-tools and fists and everything else, and then there would be a blast of machine gun fire. Not much of a hill, it was just this mass of confusion and chaos up there, real ugly piece of terrain. But at this point, Surabachi's out of the fight. Yes, sir. Well, I will make sure that I come down and shake your hand. I'm going to make sure that I've got that connection to you as well. Be thrilled to. Well, thank you, sir.
What's the story of General Surabashi being buried underneath that one airstrip? Japanese are break out and see if they can find him.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be a lot of help to you. I hear a lot of the same stories, but I don't know what's what. All I can tell you about Kobayashi, which I think is interesting, is General Holland Smith. They call him Howland Smith. You're familiar with that name, Lieutenant General. But he points out to us that he said in his book, we found out who Kobayashi was by listening to Tokyo radio after the battle. They didn't know who that was. But apparently, right off the bat, he had high respect for this guy. There are quotes that you see, I think on the first day of the battle. He said, I don't know who this guy is, but he's one smart, you know what. And by the way, it gives us an opportunity, since you mentioned Kobayashi, let's emphasize just how different Iwo Jima was from everything that we had seen before. And we have to point at Kobayashi for that. We've never seen coordination from the Japanese before. Coordinated fires, massed fires, the way they moved within the island from position to position. One thing I did not point out to you, I'll give you this. The 4th Marine Division described what they were doing to us up there as mouse trapping, where they would draw small Marine groups down into a cross compartment, pin them down, and then pound them with mortars. We'd never seen anything like that from them before. General Kobayashi certainly should get credit for that.
We're just about to wrap it up. And what I'd like to do is, if we could, for the Marines, as you're exiting, just sort of stay on this side. So for veterans and families, make a head call before you head back on the bus. Make sure that that's available. What was the number one thing? Why is this important for us here on the depot and throughout Western Recruiting Region? Was this just a history lesson? No, it's not just a history lesson. What is the one theme that you heard that Mr. McCloud talk about that made the Marines different? Teamwork, resolve, initiative, courage, dedication, commitment, patriotism, valor. The drill instructors, the company officers, that's your mission each and every day. That's why we're here. Whether it's 1944 or 2020. Those Marines who landed on the embassy in Baghdad just over Christmas, many of them were 3 months out of boot camp, found themselves in an uncertain environment, boarding onto Ospreys and landing on the roof of an embassy which they'd never known before. That's why you are here. For those in headquarters service battalion, or WRR, the takeaway, think about the logistics, think about the support, think about that one Marine that all he did was run ammunition to those on the front line. What happens on this side of the street can't happen if the things on this side of the street don't happen first. But it is that resolve, it is that commitment, the drive for valor, building of character, the desire, the commitment, the drive to win. When I asked Mr. McCloud last night at a function we're at, I said, what was the Japanese, what was a win in the eyes of the Japanese? It was to inflict such destruction, to inflict such casualties that the Americans would stop. The problem, they underestimated the Marine. So I'm looking at this DI school class, those drill instructors and officers are out here. This is your mission. Teach them resolve so that they can go forth and do the same thing. Again, Mr. McCloud, thank you very much for what you did. And to all the veterans and families, thank you for being here. Semper Fidelis.